Very good. Okay. So there's a link that you're going to need to have after this. This is the link tiny.cc/N1MM-Elmer. That'll give you access to view the slideshow because you can watch the recording, but that doesn't do you any good as far as clicking the links that are in the slideshow. There's a number of links throughout the slideshow, and most of the time they have a little link icon after it to denote that it's a link you can click on. So again, this link, and I'll give it a couple times, we'll let you get to the slideshow. This is me in my shack. As I mentioned earlier, this is a map from a couple days ago of the people that were signed up to take this session today. And here's a list of the people that are signed up. And let's see. Okay, so let's talk about N1MM Logger Plus. It's a free program. It runs on Windows-based computers. It's open source. There's a variety of people that work on the project. It's a contest logging software. It's not a general logging software, and I'll talk a little bit more about the difference between that later. It also has the ability to interface with rigs and control, to rig control and interfacing. Also has the ability to do CW and voice keying. One of the things about N1MM is it's packed with features, and unfortunately, when you're starting out, sometimes this can be rather intimidating. You might think, well, I can't use that program. There's way too many windows popping up all over the place and too many things to do. So what I suggest you do is, as you start learning the program, start using it and just concentrate on the parts you need that you understand right now, with the idea that as you get more comfortable, you can start using additional features. One really good way to get more proficient with it is just practice when you're not actually operating. Just open up the log, tune into a contest, find a good strong station that's calling CQ, and just pretend you're that station and practice logging the same calls that he's getting on your computer, just so you're not having the pressure of being in the contest and trying to use the software at the same time you're trying to learn it. Create some cheat sheets that you can keep around the shack. Maybe some of the keyboard shortcuts might be helpful. And there's a wide variety of YouTube videos available that you can watch for different features. These are all links. As I mentioned earlier, when you go to the slideshow, if you see this little link picture, that means that this is a link. And I don't put the underlines under the text because it's hard to read in slideshows. So don't worry if you don't see that. And these are all resources. I'm going to click on the first one here just to show you that these links do work. And this takes you to the N1MM page. And this is pretty much the beginning information on it. As far as interfacing your radio and computer, you do not need to interface your radio if you don't want to, but there's a lot of advantages to doing that. We'll talk about some of these things. If you don't have a radio already interfaced or you don't plan on doing it, don't worry about it right now. I'm going to cover a lot of things today at a variety of levels. We're going to talk about things for the absolute beginner, but we're also going to talk about things for people that are much more experienced. So there's going to be something for everyone, but not everything is going to be for everyone. So don't worry if some of this seems a little bit over your head or something you're not interested in. I have information on interfacing your radio, and one of the things that you need to do to be able to work with N1MM is know what port your radio is on your computer. Just a couple words about interfacing if you haven't already done it, if you're planning on doing it. Always install the driver software if there's driver software to be installed before you connect your radio to your computer. I also mentioned in this previous slide that if you're using the FTDI chip, if you're buying new interface cables, look for the FDI chip in it and not the prolific chip, which seems to have a number of problems with it. So again, those are just some hints. If you're, for some reason my pointer won't come on here and I'm not sure why. Okay, there we go. Okay. There's information on the N1MM site about interfacing radios, and then I also have two links that are from outside sources. One's called Ham Guide to Interfacing Everything, and then a really good slideshow, and there's also a video of it from Bob N6TV that talks about USB and serial interfaces. Even if you're an expert in USB ports and serial interfaces, you'll find some information in there from Bob that'll be useful. So something really good to take a look at. And then a list of the radios that are supported for interfacing by N1MM. I also have some specific instructions on different radios, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the specific ones, but some information from N1MM and then also some outside information on interfacing. So let's start at the very beginning. If you're going to install N1MM and you've not already installed it, you would need to download the full installer software and go through the instructions. And I will actually take a quick look at this in a moment here. But what I'd like is down at the bottom of your participants. I'm sorry, we don't have that capability. I thought we did, but we don't. But based on the survey, I see that most of the people have already installed it. If you've not installed it, we'll let you get a chance to do that in a little while, but don't do it right now because it requires you to restart your computer. Every time you start the software up, it'll automatically look for updates when you load it. And so you're going to get a question quite often when you start up N1MM. It'll say there's a new version. Would you like to download it and install it? Now, unlike some other software where that can be very dangerous, I'd suggest that you typically do that unless it's 5 minutes before a big contest that you're very worried about operating in. That may not be the time you want to download a new version. So check the software a couple days before the contest to make sure that you get the latest version updated in time to operate in the contest. Once you've installed the software, you need to go through a few steps, and we're actually going to go through some of these live with the software in a few moments here. But when you start the software up, the first question you're going to get is about creating a new database. You're going to get a little window that comes up, and it's going to look, I thought I had a picture of it, but I don't. It's going to ask if you want to create a new database, convert an old database, or I forget the third option. Just create a new database. One word about databases in general is you can have as many databases as you want. You can keep all your logs in one database, or you can have one database for each of your logs contest if you want to. So the first thing I want to talk about is editing station information. I have a screenshot here of it, and I'm going to bring up N1MM here. And give me a thumbs up if you can see the N1MM software. It should have popped up over top of this. If it didn't, though, I will restart my share here. Are you seeing it? Give me a thumbs up if you are. Okay, good. So the way we get to the configure it is from the top menu here. In this window we're going to be clicking on most of the time is called the entry window, data entry window, and I'm going to go in here to configure, and I'm going to go down to where it says change your station data. And it brings up this screen with our information on it. Some of these things are important, some are optional. Like you don't have to have your address in here, but what it does by putting it there is when you send in a log, the log will have your address in it automatically when it goes to the sponsor. So you probably want to fill this out. Some of the things like your CQ zone, your ITU zone, when you operate in a contest that requires that as the exchange, it'll pull it automatically from your station information. So if you're ever operating from somewhere other than home, you're going to need to change the station information to match wherever you're at, or it won't be accurate. Things like what your radio is doesn't really affect the operation of the program. That's not where it gets the information from. Your antenna, those are all optional things. But again, things like your section will be pulled in for exchanges when it's looking for that. And your default club that you might belong to, again, isn't absolutely necessary. So those are just some of the things, and you can always change that information by going up to configure, change your station data. So let me go back to our slide presentation here. Slide presentation up. Give me a thumbs up if it's very good. Okay, so let's talk about radio interfacing basics. And this is probably one of the areas that a lot of people get hung up on. So if this doesn't go real smooth today, Don't worry, you can go back and go through this when you have more time, but I just want to go through some of the basics of it to start us out. So you don't have to interface a radio with it. You can operate in what's called the manual mode, where you put in the information, you change the N1MM screen to put in the frequency, the band that you're on, as opposed to letting the radio do it. But if you do choose to have radio control and frequency interfacing, N1MM will automatically read the information from your radio displayed on the screen and also put it into your log whenever you log someone. That's one of my favorite things about the program. When I used to do paper logging, I'd forget to write down that I was changing the band that I was on, or when I was using the first couple of computer logging software programs that are out there, I would do the same thing. I didn't have interface capability, so I forget to change the band when I would change bands on my radio, and of course then my log is all off. In addition, the interfacing can be used to key your radio in CW, key it the microphone, or operate digital modes. And all of these settings are done from what's called the configurer, and we'll go through all the different tabs in the configurer later, but right now what we want to concentrate on is the hardware tab, and I'm going to actually show you how we do that with the N1MM program itself. So I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to click on configure. I'm going to go to configure ports, modes, controls, WinKey, etc. And it's going to bring up a screen here, hopefully. There we go. And on this screen, we have a couple parts. Right now, as I said earlier, I'm on the hardware tab. And on the hardware tab, we can put in the port that we're using by clicking on the little drop down. And I'm going to go ahead and just pretend I'm setting up another radio here. So I'm going to say that, for example, that this is on COM 10. Let's pick a COM that it's not being used for something else. Okay, we'll say it's on COM 38. And I choose my radio from the drop-down menu. And again, there's a wide variety of radios here. Some of the radios, though, are not listed here, but they will ask you to use a different model to work with that. So, for example, on a lot of the Tentec radios, they used, I'm sorry, on the early Elecraft radios, they used the Kenwood setting, so you could just choose that radio in place of it. Eventually, most of the radios get added, so those Elecraft radios that weren't originally there are now all available. So again, you pick your radio from this list here. So we're going to pick a Yaesu 991 off the list. The next thing on the list, there's two little check boxes. One is for digital operation, that's RTTY. Then there's a CW, if you're going to do CW interfacing, we'll talk about that later. And then the next box, the details box, when you click on that, that is where you put in your port that you're using, your baud rate, and a couple other features that are dependent on the radio. So the first thing you always need to know is what port the radio's on, and that's out here. We've already set that. You need to know what baud rate your radio is set for. Now this isn't the baud rate of that you see in your control panel. This is actually the baud rate that you've set your radio to. Depending on the radio you're using, there's different ways to set it. In the ICOM 7300 series, for example, you press the function key, then you go into what's called the settings, and then the connectors, and then the baud rate information is there under that portion. And again, that information is detailed on that on those links that I had a little bit earlier. Almost all the radios use N for no parity, and most of them use 8 data bits. Some of them use 2 stop bits. Most of the Yaesus do. Most of the ICOMs use 1 stop bit. And again, you can find this information out for your particular radio by going to any of the links about that radio. The next two drop-down menus are for DTR and RTS. So even though we're using USB in this case to make the connection, we're still using serial port terminology. So DTR in this case is being used to key the CW, and the RTS needs to be always off in this case. Depending again on the radio you have, these settings may be different. The drop down on this far side here is if you have radio numbers. If you're using two radios, if you're doing a single operator two radio setup, one of your radios will be radio number 1, one will be radio number 2. Otherwise, you don't need to worry about that. Just leave it on 1. As far as these little check boxes go, make sure you follow whatever is suggested for your particular model. And you don't really need to worry about this information. Now, down at the bottom, they have suggestions for what was normally used with different Yaesu radios. So you may want to set that to match the information when you're first starting out. I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to go into my other one to show you an example. This is the radio I actually have connected. This is my Eldercraft K3S, and my baud rate is 3800, no parity, 8 bits and 2 stop bits. I'm using pin number 4, DTRS, to send CW, and actually I'm not setting CW this radio, so this doesn't matter. Even though I have it set this way, I'm not actually doing the CW keying from this setting. I'll show you why in a moment here. So that's the settings I have for my Eldercraft. Now what I'm doing for my CW keying is I'm actually using another device. So I have COM33 set up, I have my CW checkbox here, and on my set you'll see that what I'm using is a WinKey interface. So I'm using a separate interface to key my radio with. You don't have to do it that way, but that's the way I have it set up, and I've had very good success with that type of interface. You really only want to have one box checked here. No matter how many radios you have, you only want to have one device controlling your CW on that radio. So if I would check this box here, the two would conflict with each other and I'd have some problems. So once I click on OK, the way I can check real quick to see whether my interfacing is working is if I look at the top of my enter screen, you'll see the frequency displayed here. I also have the band map open here, and you see the frequency displayed on the top of that. If I had my settings wrong, this would be a 0 up here. It would have no reading there. As I turn my dial on my radio, you'll notice that the band map frequency and the frequency on top of the enter is changing. See, that tells me that my interface is working. So let me screw up my interface here for a second so it's not working, and you'll see what happens when it's not working. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this from port 14 to port 39. And when I do that, and I turn my knob on my radio, nothing's happening. And if I click on my change band switch, again, nothing is happening. So it's still showing this old frequency up here, and it's showing a different frequency over here that's not even on the band I'm on. So that means that it's not working. I'm going to actually click on reset the radio here, and you'll see that it doesn't find the radio. So it can't find the radio. It's just changing based on what I'm selecting manually here. So it's not following my radio when I change the band with my radio. It only follows that if I change it on the program here. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to fix that problem by changing it back to the right port. By the way, when you ever make changes, it's a good idea to write things down so you don't forget it. I almost forgot what port I was on. So now notice my frequency immediately came back to what the radio is set at. If I change my band settings on the radio, I'm going to change the radio, not the program. You'll watch that the program changes automatically. I'm going to change it to 6 meters. And notice the change over there. I'm going to change it again, go back down to 10, 12, and you'll see that it follows along. So if I change the radio, the settings on my N1MM will change. If I change my N1MM, my radio changes. You don't see that happen, but when I click on this 40, it actually changes the radio in my shack to 40 meters. I'm going to click back on 10 here. So what I want to do now is I want to stop for a few minutes and see if we have any questions about the radio interfacing. I'm going to leave the screen share up so I can see that, but go ahead and if anyone has any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I'm using the signal link, do I still use the same settings as my radio?
The signal link doesn't control the radio operation. That has to do with your sound card operation, the signal link. So
Okay.
if using, and that's a very good question, because a lot of people think, well, if I buy a signal link, that'll interface my radio. What interfaces your radio for digital purposes, but it doesn't interface it for operating the radio, controlling the radio. So we're talking about control of the radio as opposed to just interfacing it. So that is correct. So that in that case, you would have two different ports listed on your control panel when you look at them. And you'd have to distinguish between which one is the port that's being used by the signal link and which is the port that's being used by the radio interface. On most, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but on most of the modern radios, the interface cable is simply a USB cable. On some of the older radios, you might have different types of serial cables, custom proprietary cables. Other questions on interfacing the radio?
I missed where where you did the radio reset after you changed COM ports fooling around. Where was the
Yes.
radio reset button, please?
When you right click on the band map, you can go to reset radio from there. So everyone see that? Right click on the band map. Is that showing up on the screen?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let me reshare that. Okay, does everyone see me right click on the band map now?
Yep, it's
Yes.
there.
Okay, so right down here there's a control that says reset radio, and I'm doing it from right there. Okay, other questions?
Which telnet did you connect to?
We'll talk about telnet later.
Okay, no problem.
I noticed you didn't have the same stop bit as was recommended by the computer. What was the reasoning for that?
Possibly because I didn't have it right when I was playing around with things. Here, let me take a look. On which one? On the Elcraft?
Yes.
Because I don't have it set right. That's what the problem is. And I've been using it for days without any problem. So it's not much of an issue anymore. It used to be much more an issue when you're using pure serial cables, but with the USB interfaces and USB, it doesn't seem to be an issue. Glad you noticed that. Other questions?
Anthony, Ron,
Yes.
K85HZV. I'm
Yes.
brand new to this, and I've got an FT891.
Yes.
I'm trying to get it hooked up for N1MM, and I'm only using one cable. I can't seem to find out if I need two cables. I'm using the one that looks just like a printer cable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to get control of the radio of the radio through the program, but that's as far as I get. I can't hook up to CW or anything.
Okay. As far as the program control, that works fine. For the CW, though, you cannot control the CW on that particular radio with just one cable. You're going to need to build a CW interface or purchase something like the WinKeyer to connect to it. Now, the CW interface is really simple. It's not that complex, and there's instructions on the N1MM site for building a simple one using either a transistor or a optical isolator to do that, or you can purchase something like the WinKeyer and you do it that way. Some radios like the ICOM 7300 let you do CW keying with the same USB cable used for control. Other radios don't let you do the same thing. So it depends on the particular radio. So on the 891, with the one USB cable, you'll be able to do all of the control and frequency reading and all that sort of thing, but you won't be able to do the CW keying from it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Anthony, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Klaus. Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
second. Go ahead.
I'm not sure who that was, so go ahead.
Okay, my question is, Anthony, this is Scott Can for SMO.
Yes.
You right-clicked on the band map, and I've never seen that happen before. Are you going to go over like set transceiver offset frequency, all those
well, I'm going to go
spots?
I'm going to go over a lot of those, but not all of them. But yeah, there's a lot of controls on there. And I just want to mention that almost every window, let me go ahead and share this and just show real quick here. Almost every window in N1MM when you right click on it, it lets you do configuration. So if I'm on the entry window here and I right click on it, you'll see that I get a set of configuration tools. One of the things you might have noticed before is, remember when I said I'm clicking on 6 meters? Well, there's no 6 meters on here. And we can add that by clicking on the change band panel button, and that lets us choose which frequencies we want to display on the display. So I can say that I want HF bands on there, which I have right now, but I can also add 6 meters on there, and then it will show up on the display. So I can change these settings by right clicking on it. So by right clicking again on here, I can change the band panel settings. I can also do things like turn off GMT times. Notice it's up here, I'm showing the time on here. I can turn this off. It doesn't affect operation. It just customizes it. So there's a lot of things, as I said earlier, that you can customize in the program.
Anthony,
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Klaus K6KHB.
Yes.
There's so many windows. How do you decide which ones to have open at any one time?
I'm going to talk about that in just a little while.
Okay, thanks.
That's one of my things, because that's a big thing. And as Klaus said, not only do you have to choose which windows you want, but how big you want them and where you want them on your screen. And that's a lot of matter of personal preference, but I'll talk about that. Other questions? If everyone can mute if they're not talking, please. Someone's radio's coming through. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, just fine.
My question is, I have 3 radios that I use for various purposes, and it seems like in N1MM I can set up 2 of them, but not the third. It doesn't really allow that. Do you know anything about that? I can add the third COM port, but it won't let me choose the drop-down for the radio. What am I doing wrong?
It supports 2 radios at one time, so you have to disable one of the first 2 to get the third one.
And by disable, you just mean unchecking it?
Just uncheck the COM port or uncheck the radio. You can do it either way. You notice, for example,
Okay.
let me go ahead and show my screen here again, because I actually have that set up, because I do switch back and forth. So you notice in my setting here, I have the 891 here, the 991, but I don't typically use it all the time. So I keep the settings here, and then I just turn the port off.
Okay, I get it.
Because
okay, thank you.
You can only really have 2 radios. You have radio 1 and radio 2. They don't have provisions for more than that. But you can configure a half a dozen radios here, and then just switch the comms on and off.
Okay, yeah, that was it. I have to turn off the COM port then.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Other items? Other questions?
I do have a question. I haven't seen any of your, when the radio doesn't communicate with N1MM, it says sometimes on my screen, do you want to reset the radio or reset? And my COM port says it's time. It says N1MM logger has lost communication with radio 1. I get that a lot.
Okay. Are you using a laptop?
Yes.
Okay. You definitely want to read through the article from N6TV about USB ports. What I am guessing is there's a setting on USB ports to turn it off when when the computer's on battery operation. And even if the computer doesn't go on battery operation, that means that occasionally the USB port will be turned off, even when you don't want it to be. And you can go in and change that setting in the COM port settings. So
yeah, you tell it not to go to sleep, correct?
Yes. But there's also some other settings too. So I would definitely read through that article. If anyone's having problems with USB ports acting up, that's the place I would suggest you start looking first, is in N6TV's article.
N6TV.
Yeah, that's in the links that I have here.
Roger.
It's this article right here on everything you need to know about USB and serial interfaces. Any other questions before we move to the next section?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm using Write Log right now, connected to the radio for most of my logging programs. Do I have to change N1MM if I want to use it from the Write Log settings?
Most of the settings will work. Just make sure you jot down on a piece of paper what the settings are for your computer port and all that. You can't be running both programs at the same time though, so you'll have to make sure that you're not running one before you start the other one, or it'll hold the COM port and won't release it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to bring the screen share up again here. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you can see using the program for the first time. Very good. Okay, so I mentioned CW a little bit here, and we'll talk more about CW a little bit later. But again, as I said, you put a checkbox in the CW column, and then you have to make sure you have it set up right for the radio you're using, or the WinKey device or other type of device you're using. So let's go ahead and start a new contest, and I'll walk you through what we need to do. And I'm actually going to do that with the software instead of showing you the screenshots here, but let me just go through the screenshots real quick. So we would go to File, and then we need to set up a new database. Now, as I said earlier, you don't need to do this every time, but if you want to set up a new database before a contest, you can. The next thing you need to do is to set up a new contest. We actually call that a new log in the database. So that's how you set up a new contest. So when I say new log or new contest, I'm talking about the same thing. So I may slip up and call those the same thing, but new log in the database is what you do when you want to set up a new contest. Now, let's say you're operating 4 contests in the same weekend. Well, you might want to keep the same database and have all 4 of those new logs in the database. And let's say one of them is a 160 contest at night, and the other one is a VHF contest you're operating during the day, and you want to switch back and forth between those. You wouldn't create a new log each time you go in to start up the contest. You would go back and open the previous log that you were using, and I'll actually demonstrate that in a few seconds here. So let me go ahead and switch over to my N1MM screen. Hopefully this will come up on top of that. Can you see N1MM on top of that? Very good. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up a new contest. Right now, I'm just going to keep the same database, but I could set up a new database too, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say new log in the database. So when I do that, it brings up my screen to create the new log. The first thing I have to decide is what contest it is. And this is sometimes tricky because they're all abbreviations. They don't have them written out in longhand. So you might say, okay, I want to do the CQ worldwide. Is it under W for worldwide? Or in this case, it's under CQ WW. And then I got to pick whether I want the CW contest or the RIDI contest or the single sideband contest. So this weekend I was operating in the ARRL 160 contest. Well, is it under 160? No, it's under, in this case, ARRL 160 right here. Let's say I want to operate field day. Well, that's the ARRL field day, isn't it? Well, it's not here, but guess where it is? It's here under FD. So if you can't find it, just look around a little bit or ask someone you know who uses the program a lot, and they'll tell you that it's hidden under that. Now, let's say I want to work the Michigan QSO party. Well, that's under M, isn't it? Nope. If I want to work the Ohio QSO party under O, no. All the state QSO parties are under one abbreviation, and that is the letter Q for QSO party. And here it is, QSO party. Okay. For right now, we're gonna say that we want to operate, I don't know, we'll pick something weird that I've never used before. We're gonna operate in the CQMMDX. So when I click on that, I then need to go in and set my settings for that particular contest. I need to pick which power I'm going to operate. I need to pick which mode I'm going to be operating in, or which modes. And I need to say whether I'm assisted or non-assisted. So I pick all those different things. I'm going to cancel this right now because I don't want that particular contest. So let me come back here and go in and start a new contest again. So let's say we want to stay QSO party. I'm going to come down here and choose the Q. Now, on the state QSO party, I had to pick what state it is, and that's in this drop down on the right here. And this is one of the few contests where there's multiple contests. When you pick up here, you're actually only selecting a subset of contests, and there's over 40 of these available. So once I find the state I want, I said Michigan, so we'll pick the Michigan party right here. It then puts Michigan in there. What it does next is it looked at my information in my remember how we set up our station information? It said you're in Ohio, so you probably want to send Ohio as your exchange. So that's where it gets that information from. Now this is just a suggestion. Let's say I was traveling out of state and I was actually in Vermont. I can just change it right there. I don't need to change my station information. I could just simply change my exchange I want to use. The little number in front of it means that this is a contest where you need to send a serial number. So that number sign means it's going to be the serial number plus the state I'm in. Let's pick another state instead. Let's pick Ohio. Notice what it's asking me here. It says, oh, you're in Ohio, so you need to put your county in here, not your state. And it wants your county abbreviation, and I can get that from the contest sponsors information. So I'm in Summit County. Let's pick another state. Let's say I'm going to operate the Missouri party. Well, it says you're in Ohio, and guess what? It doesn't need a serial number, so it doesn't put that in front of there. So it tries to figure out this information for you. If it doesn't know the information, it asks you the information. So it didn't know what county I was in Ohio, so it says my county, and it puts a question mark there. So let's say we're doing the Ohio QSO party. I'm going to put in Summit for my county. I'm going to check everything else to make sure it's what I want. And everything looks good on this, and I could click OK, but I need to do one more thing first. I don't have to, but if I click on this Associated Files tab at the top here, I want to have what's called the call history file name, and you'll see that I'll demonstrate this a little bit later. But if I click on change here, it says there's a newer one available. Do you want to download it? Okay, and I would click on yes, and it would download it for me, and now it has the most recent version of it there. If there's nothing there, it'll ask me if I want to download it. And in some cases, you have to manually download it, and I'll show you how to do that later when we talk about this. But for right now, let's see, it was there. I got the one I want. I go back and check my contest information. Everything looks okay. When I'm all set, I click the OK button. When I do that, it automatically changes the contest. But before it does, it says, you're entering this contest as an in-state participant. Is that correct? And it is. So I click OK. If it wasn't, I would need to go back and change this information. Notice now that at the top of my log right here, it now says OHQSO party. It doesn't put anything up here though. It just puts it right here on my log screen. It also now gave me a CW and phone button here as opposed to just the CW button before when the contest I was set for before. So that's the basics on how to set up a new contest. Now remember I said if we want to open a contest we've already set up, not from last year, but from today, because I'm working another contest today or this week, I click on File, I go to Open Login Database, and I want to go back to one I worked before. Here's all the ones that are currently in this database. I want the 160 contest, the one I'm currently working in. I double click on it here, and I click on the OK button. Well, actually, if I click on it one time and then click on the OK button or double click it. Now, notice right here it says I'm now operating in the 160 contest. So it keeps the two logs in two separate logs because they're two separate contests. So I'm going to pause there. That's what we need to do to set up a new contest. Any questions on that? Okay. So the next question that came up is all these different windows. What do I do with all these? Do I need all these? It's sort of like this house. Do you need all these windows? No, you might like them, but it means you got to buy a lot of drapes, or you have to be a voyeur that wants to show off your house. So we need to decide which windows we really need and which ones we really want and which ones are helpful. So what I'm going to do is go through all the different windows that I'm using plus some information on the windows. The main window though is the entry window. This is one that you're going to have open to operate in the contest. and it's the one I was showing you here. It's this window right here. That window actually has multiple parts. The first part is the title bar, and it shows me the frequency and it shows me where I'm operating. The next thing is the menu bar, and this is where we make changes. And then the main thing on the entry screen, as far as entry goes, is the place you put the call sign and the exchange information in. There's a little section in the middle that has two little lights, and then it has a choice between run and search and pounce. So whether you're calling CQ or whether you're answering other people's CQs. There's a section on the macro buttons, and we'll talk about those later, but you can click on any of these and have it send that information. And then down at the bottom is information that you choose to have displayed down there. It's just messages. So let's take a look at the actual window here. Give me a thumbs up if you can actually see the entry window. Very good. So I'm going to pretend that I'm working one of you in this contest. So let's work Greg, WB7GR. So I've typed his call sign in there. The next thing I do is I don't hit the enter key. I use the space bar to move to the exchange. Now in this particular contest, he's going to send me his state. So Greg, tell me your state, please. Just push that space bar and unmute your mic for a second.
Wyoming.
Wyoming. See, I got a good multiplier. I thought that was the case. So I'm going to type in the abbreviation for Wyoming. And I'm going to wait until he confirms that I'm in Ohio, and he says thank you, and I know now I'm ready to log it because I got everything right. What I do now is I press the enter key with my hand and watch what happens. It puts his information into my log right here. It shows into my log window. It also showed me that it was a multiplier, but this little check mark, and it says it was worth 2 points. It also increased my score. Unfortunately, I can't use that. So all the information is there. Now, oops. This contest is over, so I really can't add him. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to say delete the contact. And now it's gone. Okay. So if you make a mistake and put someone in there that you shouldn't put in, if you hit the enter key too quick before they respond to you, you can take it out. Now let's say I was working another station. I hear N8II. So I type them in. And oops, it's in gray. The reason it's in gray is because I've already worked him in this contest. He's a dupe, and he would normally show up as a dupe here, but the contest is actually over, so it's not showing up as there'd be a red dupe that would show up here, unfortunately. I'm not sure why it's not showing it right now, but oh, you know why? Because I'm on the wrong band, wrong mode. Let's click the right band here. This is a 160 contest, so you have to be on 160. There we go. Notice he's a dupe. See the big red pop up here? Dupe. So I can't work him. So let's say instead I heard PJ2T. Now look what happened. As I start typing it, notice over here in this window, this is called the check window. It started to show me all the stations that were in the database for PJ2 before I even typed the last character in. So I could come over here and double click on this if I wanted to, or I can finish typing it here. Again, I press the space bar and I put in his exchange when I'm ready to. Why is he in red? Because he's a multiplier, and he knew he was going to be a multiplier because I've not worked him before. Now, I really don't want to work him. He's not there. I thought it was him, but I was hearing things. I could hold down the alternate key and press the W key on my keyboard, and that wipes out and resets it so that no one's there. So alternate W is the way you remove a call sign that you didn't want in there. So that's pretty much the way the exchange window works, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the details on that, but I just wanted to show you some of the information. Let me just type another call sign in here. I'm going to type someone I know has an exchange that's going to come up. Let's see here. I'm striking out on guesses here. what I'm trying to do is get the exchange to come up automatically, but none of these people are in this in this log file for this, so it's not going to work. But never mind that. So that's how the exchange window works. So let's go back to our information. So again, we put our exchange in the entry window. When we press the space bar, it accepts it. I showed you earlier, if you want to customize that by right-clicking on that entry window, you can make some of the changes you want. And again, I'm just showing you a different contest here. Here's the exchange. Now, if the exchange has multiple parts to it, like the ARRL sweepstakes, you can simply put a space in between each of these. You don't need to type them in separately. Okay? So in this particular contest, it lets you type them in, all the exchange information with spaces between them. Again, the enter key is what puts it into the log. Now, the other thing you can do is if you press the escape key, that'll back you out of whatever you're doing. These are some keyboard shortcuts in the entry window. Use the space bar, or you can also use the tab if you want to move between fields. Again, don't use the enter key when you want to move between fields. When you hit enter, that means you've completed the QSO and it puts it into the data, into the log file. If you do Control Alternate Enter, it'll log it as an incomplete result. So let's say you didn't get the other person's exchange, but you know that they put you in the log. If you leave them out completely, that means they won't get points for it. They're going to get dinged because you didn't make a contact. So if there's anything wrong with a contact, but you still want to log it, do Control Alternate Enter, and it'll let you put a note in. So for example, I could do that. Let's go back and do that. Control Alt Enter, and it says I'm going to enforce the QSO in there, and I'm going to say did not get his exchange.
Hey Anthony, someone
Yes.
asked, what does it mean if the call sign is blue in the entry field?
Oh, that means it's a valid call sign that you can work for points. You're going to get one of three colors. One of four colors. Blue means it's just a call that you can work in the contest. See, there's one right there, N1MM. If it's a multiplier, it'll be in red. And sometimes it won't know whether it's a multiplier or not until you put the exchange in. So that's why when I work WB7GR, he's not in red immediately, he's in blue, but watch what happens when I put in the Wyoming. See, he turns red because it knows he's a multiplier now. And contests that have double multipliers, like the CQ Worldwide has both zones and countries, green means it's a double multiplier. It means you're going to get two multipliers for that particular contact. And then the last choice, gray, means that it's either a duplicate or either you've worked it and it's a duplicate, or it's someone you can't work in this particular contest. So let's say this was a DX only contest. If I type in a US station, it'll come up in gray, even though I haven't worked it, because it won't count for points. So gray will not count for points. So blue is a standard contact, no extra multipliers. Red is a contact with a multiplier. Green is a contact with a double multiplier. And the same thing will happen on your band map. When you're seeing information on your band map, the same color codes apply. Very good. Thank you for reading the chat. I can't see it when I'm sharing the screen. Other questions? So alternate W wipes it out. And if you just want to put a note in for some reason, like really bad signal, chirp on it, you can do N, Control N on the, and it'll let you add that. You can also use Control D to delete the last QSO from the log, but I actually like to right click on it so I know that I'm getting the right one. I'm sort of afraid that I might delete the wrong one. And then let's talk about editing it here. So let's say I'm working on this and I type in a call sign and I put in the wrong one. Let's put in the wrong call sign here. Okay, and I entered that into my log. Well, you know what? It's not going to work because there's no number there at all. It's an invalid call sign. So I entered that in my log, and I realized, oop, that's wrong. I can double click on it and change it this way by just typing on it, or I can right click on it and choose edit log, and it brings up this whole entry window where I can edit anything. So I can come in here and change this from an O to a 0, and I can come in and change that 1. So now I have the call incorrect. I had the call in there correct. And then whenever you edit with the edit window, you have to make sure you hit the update button. And then that makes the change. I can also right click on it and delete it, or I can use the Control D. If you're doing a contest with multiple operators and you sit down in the seat to operate, if you do a Control O, it'll ask you to put your call sign in. That's the person that's logging. This only applies if you're having a contest where more than one person's operating the same station. You can also do the same thing by typing op on in here, and that will bring up that message. And again, these are all things that I don't expect you to remember. They're all in the handout. So these are all in the slideshow for your future reference. So when you want to change the frequency and mode, there's a couple ways to do it. The first way is that you can click on the band you want to change to by clicking on the little arrows here, or you can go to the band map and you can double click on a station that's showing in the log. Let me get some people in the log here so we can see someone. Let's see here. So on 40 meters. You can also change the frequency, of course, by actually touching the radio, which I'm doing right now. Okay, why are we not getting it? Oh, I know why, because we got a contest here. It doesn't have anyone in it. Okay. Let me switch out of this contest because I'm in this 160 contest. It's not going to help me show you how to do things that aren't on 160. So we'll go back into this Ohio party here. Okay. Don't mind what I'm doing right now. I just want to get something to show you, something to display here for you. Okay, I'm going to come back to that because I'm not sure why I'm not seeing anyone in the band map now, but I'll show you that later. You can also type the frequency directly into the enter window. You can see that changes my frequency. So if you want to jump to a frequency, you can just type it in there. It'll change bands also if you type in a frequency on a different band. So the next window we want to talk about is one we've already talked about, and that's the logging window. And that's where all your contacts go after you press the enter key. And as I said earlier, you could right click on it to enter this, to edit things. Also, if you work the same station more than once on a different band, you'll see a list of all the different times you've worked them down here on this lower part of the entry screen. So there's two parts to the entry screen. The upper part and then the lower part down here. So if I work N8II again, on a different band, which I'm allowed to do in this case, you'll see that he shows up twice down here. And when I work another station, oh, by the way, I hit enter there and it didn't work. Why didn't enter work? Because I don't have the exchange. It'll warn you the first time, and if you still want to force it, you can do it, but I don't want to force it. I'm going to put the exchange in there, proper exchange, and hit enter. And it says, this is invalid exchange. Do you want to enter it anyway? And it'll show you as an error because it wasn't a valid exchange for that contest. So the real exchange was SUMM. And it says, do you want to change it? And I'll say yes. And now see, now it still has an error. So I'm going to delete this whole contact and just put it in again. So again, if it tells you it doesn't want to log it, do you want to force it? Usually the answer is no. You want to make sure you fix whatever the problem is. And now it's entered properly. So don't worry if you see multiple stations down here. That just means you've worked them on more than one band. So if I go to another band here and start typing him in again, he'll show up again here. And I'll work him again. We already talked about editing contacts. Okay, so on the band map, I'm gonna have to show you this from here because it doesn't seem like I'm getting any activity actually in the band map. So with an interfaced radio, if you have Telnet hooked up, you'll start to see spots showing up in your band map, and hopefully they'll show up here in a little while. And you can double click on these and it'll actually change the radio to that frequency and put this information into the enter field. You then need to put the exchange there. So let's see if any are showing up here yet. I don't think I'm getting any spots. Why am I not? There we go. That's one I put in there. Oh, by the way, I want you to notice, watch what happens when I go to the end of the band. Once you go out of the band, the numbers will all show up in red. That shows you that you're not tuned in the band. Notice that this is red here and this is blue. That means you went out of the band. I do not know why I'm not seeing anyone in my spot log here. I will work on that. But again, on the band map, if I double click on this station, it'll go in there. Also, when I type information in, it'll automatically put it in there. So let's say I want to work, I hear NUA here, and he doesn't hear me. And I try and he doesn't hear me. If I tune away from him, it'll leave a spot in my band map so I can go back to it automatically. And it shows it in blue because he'll be a valid contact. If I work him, let's see, I work this other station, and he's in Cuyahoga County, he'll show up on my band map in gray because he's already been worked. So this station is still available for me to work him, and I can double click on that. We'll just pretend it tuned away. And if I come back and double click on this, it'll put it into the field and automatically retune the radio, and I can try working him again. So information can come in not only from spots, but also anyone I enter in the window will show up here on my band map. So I can go back to it. So information comes in from anything you put in when you're searching and pouncing, spots from the Telnet window when it's working properly, which I'll fix here in a few minutes. I'm not sure why it's not working. Also, if you're working in multiple station operation, you could have spots show up that your fellow operators are working. And then the last way is you can use your own receiver, like an SDR, to feed information. And if using like CW skimmer to pull in your information from an SDR, you can do that and get that information into your band map. So that's the band map window. The band map window settings was something that someone asked me about earlier. So let's go through that right now. Here's a whole list of them, and I'm going to go actually out and demonstrate some of them. Some of them you can put a check mark in front of. That means it'll turn on that setting. Other ones, you click on it and it does something. So let's actually go out to the band map here, right click on it, and notice that some of them are in gray because I can't show the last 10 spots because there's not 10 spots on there. But I can do things like zoom in, zoom out. I can also do that by holding down my control key and using my mouse wheel and zoom in this way or zoom out this way. I can set the transceiver offset frequency. I can set the transceiver timeout. I can look for a call sign by using the alternate and F8 key. That'll help me find someone. So if I wanted to find someone here, I could do that. Alternate F8. Oops, let's do the right one. Alternate F8. And it tries to find that last spot. You can choose how long your spots are going to stay on there. I have it set for 30 minutes right now. You can change that. And then there's a whole help section you can bring up by right clicking on that, and it should bring up the help section. I'm not sure where it went. It went on to another screen that is not showing on my share. Okay. So that's the band map. Now the other control in the band map is if you want to go to the next station available, if you hold down the control key and press the down arrow, it'll jump down to the next available station to work. If you do Control Alt and press the arrow key, it will jump to the next multiplier available to work. If you use the up, you can use the up arrow or the down arrow. So if I use the down arrow, see it found the next set of stations available to work. If I use the down control arrow, it'll jump to the next multiplier station available to work. And when I press the space bar, it automatically puts the call sign into the log field, and then I can work the station and finish up. So control arrow up or control arrow down or control alternate arrow up or control alternate arrow down brings you to the multipliers. Alternate W wipes it out. Okay, so let's talk about the telnet window. The telnet window is the connection that feeds into the band map. And here's my telnet window, and I'm going to bring it up and talk about it. I'm going to make it bigger so we can see it. Okay, is everyone seeing the telnet window? Okay.
We do.
So the thing you need to do on the telnet window is first you need to select the cluster you want to use. And I have a list here of the ones I want, but if you use this top drop down, you can find all the clusters that are listed here that you might want to use, and they're sorted by continent. So let's say I'm in North America and I want someone in the 9 call district. I can go through here and look for someone I want, click on that. That will then allow me to connect to that cluster. Okay. What I do then is I click on the connect to button. It'll bring up that cluster hopefully. And if it knows my call sign, it'll put it in there. If it doesn't know my call sign, you need to type it up the top here and then press the enter key. You can't actually type in the telnet window itself. Anything you want to enter in the telnet window, you have to do it from the top in this little type area. If you disconnect by hitting the buy key, see it sent buy there and it disconnected, I can reconnect by clicking the reconnect button and it'll automatically use my information and connect to it. I'm going to click the buy button. I'm going to go back and select another telnet location. Another cluster. And I'm going to choose my list that I have. And this is the list that I put together in the past. And I want K3LR. So I find them on the list here. He's not on my list for some reason, so I gotta go back up here and find him on this list.
Anthony, I'm getting an error when I try to reconnect to my master station. It says right click on master station to reset it.
Okay.
And I've gone in there and when I right click on it, it's not really allowing me to set it as a master station.
You know what? Let me just back up one big step here, because there's one huge thing I forgot all about, and I'm glad you mentioned it. This may not be your problem, but this is one of the problems. By default, Windows 10 does not have Telnet turned on.
You have to turn it on.
You have to turn it on. Okay, so before you do any of this, you have to go out on the internet and just look for information on turning Telnet on in Windows 10. Okay, so make a note of everyone. I'll add this to the slideshow after we're done today, but you need to turn Telnet on in Windows 10 because it's off by default. I don't know in Windows 8. I don't remember when they made the change, but you have to turn the service for Telnet back on. And if that's not turned on, it won't work no matter what you do.
Okay, just a question about that.
Mhm.
When I right clicked on, I guess my radio went to sleep.
Okay.
And it lost connection with N1MM when we were here talking. So you showed how to right click on the band map,
Yes.
and I could see where it says reset radio. Well, when I reset the radios, I think it reset everything, not just like reset your connection.
It should only reset the radio. It shouldn't do anything else.
Well, now I've had the Telnet working, and the master station was set to K3LR, and now I've got nothing. So
click on the clusters and choose that again and see whether you can get it to come up.
Well, I've done it about 4 times here.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if that actually resetting the radio, it says when I try to reconnect to K3LR, which has been, it says awaiting Telnet message from master station.
No, that's something going on at the, try choosing another Telnet for right now. Choose another cluster and try it.
Okay. Let me make sure that I'm still connected to the internet as well. I'm still connected.
Okay.
Try another one, you saying?
Yeah, just try any other one on there.
All right.
And as I said, that message I was talking, that error about Telnet didn't apply to you, but I'm glad you mentioned that because that reminded me to tell people they need to turn it on.
Okay.
Someone's got their mic unmuted, and we're hearing Christmas.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. I'll
okay.
mute. I'll go back to mute.
I want you to tell me whether that Telnet connection worked or not. Did the Telnet connect?
I think it's thinking about it, but it hasn't yet.
Okay. We'll come back to that later. But normally that should allow you should be able to connect. The other thing you can do too is there's some filters you can set, and you got to be careful because you can actually filter it so much that you won't see any spots come in. So I would use the defaults when you're starting out. Don't mess with this filtering information until you figure all this out in detail. But the one thing I want to show you is from this main screen here, this control down here, it says SHDX, tells the cluster to resend the information to you. So that'll show up. So it refreshes every so often on its own, but if you want to force a refresh, you hit the show DX button down at the bottom, and that will re-show it. Now, because I don't need to see this screen because it's showing up on my band map, I usually make this small and put it somewhere, but I don't close it completely because I don't minimize it completely because I want to make sure it keeps working. If we disconnect, for example, like Scott's did, I'd want to see that happen. So I do keep it small on the screen. So that's the telnet. Now let's talk about the check window at the top of the screen. The check window, when you start typing a call sign in, it starts looking at information, and it looks in a couple places. It looks in what's called a master list of call signs, also known as the master.scp file, or the super check partial file. It also looks at call signs that have been spotted in the telnet. It also looks at your call history text file that you uploaded when we talked about that earlier. Remember how I uploaded that file for the the contest I was working in? And the fourth place that it looks is it looks in your own log. So the stations you've already logged. So here's the information. From my log, if I type in N8I, it says, you've already worked in N8IVN. Is that who it is? Or is it one of these stations from the master list? And the master list is composed of stations that contest often. So when I type WB7GR in, Greg is not in the super partial check because he must not contest a lot. If he was contesting, he would show up on that list, but it doesn't show all the hams. It only shows the ones that are in the super partial checklist. Then the third one over here is from the call text history file, and that shows the information from that file that I uploaded manually. So this is the file that's kept at the super partial check. This is based on the stations I've already worked, and this is in that manual file that I uploaded. The bottom was what's called reverse call lookup. And the way this works is if I know the exchange but I don't know the call sign, it'll look through the information in the text file database. So let me try that real quick here. I'm on let me switch contest. I'm going to go back to the 160 contest. So let's say I knew that the state was North Dakota. So it will give me a list of all the North Dakota stations that are in the text file. So if I knew that it was North Dakota and I knew it had the letter Z in it, notice now that these are the stations that are in North Dakota that have a Z in them. Now, of course, this doesn't work if the exchange is a serial number because, of course, it doesn't mean anything to the text file. So in the case I've shown on the screen here, this was field day, and it was a 1 Delta station in Western PA, so it shows up all the 1 Delta stations in Western PA down here. A big warning about the check window. Make sure you copy the station that's actually on the air and don't just guess based on the super partial check or the call history, because it may be wrong. Especially on the call history text file, it'll put the exchange in for you automatically, and that exchange may be the exchange they used last year but not the one they're using this year. So even though these are good tools, don't depend on them 100%. Make sure you actually still listen to the station, or you may be very disappointed in your results. So questions about the band map, the telnet, or the super partial check window. And again, you have to open this window up or it won't show up. And the way we open the windows up is we go to the windows and then we pick the ones we want. So let me just close this for a second. If I want to see that, I need to click on the check button, the check, to open up that window. If I want
you mention?
yes,
Sorry.
go
Did
ahead.
you mention how to download the file from N1MM, that call history?
I showed the way to do it automatically, but I didn't show the manual way yet. I'm going to show that in a few minutes here.
Okay, no problem.
But again, let me just show that real quick while I'm thinking of it. So when we're in our log here, if we want to get the file, let me open up this other contest. Let me open up, actually, let me create a new contest. Oh, this is great. Notice I can't create a new contest. Can anyone guess why I can't create a new contest?
You have an unlogged station.
I have an unlogged station in here. I can't shut the program down. I can't create a new log. I can't do anything until I get rid of this information that's in there. So I'm gonna hit the backspace key and take that out of there. Now I can create a new contest. I can't open an old contest or create a new contest when I have a station in the logging field. So let's pick, let's see what we got here. Let's pick the CQWPX. Okay, there we go. So I want this. That doesn't have it. Never mind. That's not a good one. Let's pick field day. Okay, so field day. If I click on the associated files and I click on the change here, it will find the most recent file with the information in it and download it. If there's no file there and it doesn't give me this automatic download, I need to go out to the N1MM site. Go to the download section, go to program, go to category menu, and then go all the way to the call history text files right here. Find the contest I want. Guess what the abbreviation is, and then I can download the file manually by clicking on it here, and it will allow me to download that file. Once I download that file, I need to grab that file and actually move it into my proper directory, so I'd have to copy it. All the files for N1MM are stored under My Documents, under the N1MM folder. Are you guys seeing the file manager, hopefully? Okay, good. So in the N1MM folder, there's a subfolder for call history text files, and I would paste that into this section. So it's real nice that it automatically does it for you in most of the cases now, because this is the way you'd have to manually do it. Other questions about the super check partial call history band map window? Anyone? Okay, let's go on to the next window, and that's called the information window and the score summary window. So let me actually bring these up here real quick. Actually, the one on the screen here is much better, first of all, for that information. The information window can have any of this information on the side here. By right clicking on it, you can choose which of these things you want to see, whether you want to see these different goals, you want to see QSO times. This little timer will show you the last contact you made. So if it's sitting there for a while and it starts going up real high, it changes color to show that it turns red after a while to show you haven't made a contact in a long time. And it actually looks like this. Again, we open up the window by going over to Windows, choose the info window, and where did it? It opened up somewhere really weird on the other side of my screen here. So let me grab it, drag it back over. Here we go. And this is what it looks like. And it's pretty boring right now because I haven't made any contacts in this contest in a long time. This is the score window. And it shows you a score summary for the current contest you're in. And this particular contest only has one band because this is the 160 contest, and it shows number of points, QSOs I made, number of points, sections, and the information in my total score. Clicking the rescore button will actually go through and recalculate it. Usually you don't need to do this because it automatically rescores, but if you need to make a change somewhere, you might want to click on the rescore to have it go through and calculate it again. The multipliers window. There are multiple multiplier windows. So when we go down to multipliers, we can pick what the multiplier is for that contest. So for the 160 contest, it's the sections and states. Grab it and drag it over here where we can see it. Here it is. So the ones in blue mean I've already worked a state. If it's in red, that means that there's a multiplier available, and I can actually double click on that and it'll jump to that. There are no multipliers being spotted for this contest right now, so there's no new red marks in here, but that would be the case. And again, just like in the other cases, if it's green, that means it's a potential double multiplier. So let's take a look at the screenshot I had here because it's a lot better. Here's the ones in red are the potential multipliers. And this is an example of the CQ Worldwide contest last weekend when I was working it. This has two multipliers, so open two multiplier windows. I opened the zone map, the zone window, and I also opened the country window. So all the ones in blue on each of the bands are the ones I worked. The ones in green are potential double multipliers. The ones in red are potential single multipliers. And again, you just select them by going down to this drop down, choose the one you want. These are the country map. Okay, the other multiplier window is called the move multiplier window, and this is mainly used when you want to move someone from one band to another. We're not going to talk about this particular window right now. The gray line map basically shows the multipliers on it, but it also shows where the gray line is, and this is helpful for like 160 contests and other things where the propagation may be improved by a gray line. But it basically shows you who's in daylight and who's in dark. So those are the main windows that you're possibly going to be opening. There are some other ones, but I didn't go into the spectrum display. Would depend on whether your radio has that capability or not. The visible dupe sheet is an old style dupe sheet that I don't use very often, but if you wanted to have an old style dupe sheet show up, it'll show the calls and columns by their suffixes. And the last things on here have to do with WSJTX, which we'll talk about later. So that's the end of the Windows. So what I'd like to do is take some questions about Windows. We're going to take a 2-minute break, and then after the questions, and then we're going to come back and continue. So questions on anything we've covered so far?
Are you able
Yeah,
to
nothing.
log? Are you able to log dupes?
Yes. As a matter of fact, you should, if you actually work a station by accident, always log them. What'll happen is they'll show up in your log, and that means that the other station will get credit. Maybe they didn't work you the first time, but what won't happen is it won't add to your score, and it won't take anything back. So just go ahead and log dupes. Don't even think anything about them. Don't try and work new dupes. But I mean, when you work someone by accident, if they work you by accident, just log it. Next question. Oh, but by the way, just pause 1 second there, Paul. There's a whole class that the AWRL is going to be offering. It's got 6 sections on it. It's on contesting basics. It's an introduction to contesting. I am the person that put the class together. They haven't rolled it out yet, but when it does, there's going to be it has 6 modules and then 6 extra modules to go along with it. It's everything about contesting. Go ahead, Paul.
My question was if, say we're working a CUSO party and the mobile unit is in, say, 3 different counties and the multipliers are the counties, how should we put in those? Do we have to enter them each separately, or is there a way to enter them all in one entry?
There's no good way to do them all in one entry. Just enter them separately.
Okay.
Anthony, Ron,
Yes.
KA5HZV, can you
Yes.
direct me right to that information on building the interface for the Yaesu 891 that you mentioned?
Yes, I can. I will bring that up here in a moment. Go ahead. I'm gonna while next questions are coming up, I'll find that. If not, I'll find it over the break.
I've got a question on the call history files you downloaded.
Yes.
I'm assuming that was the last contest, the last time it took effect. That would be the history from last year's ARRL 160, correct?
Yes. And on that that's the way the call history file works. So that's why you have to be careful about using the exchange in the call history file as opposed to the actual exchange the person gives you. I saw at least 5 people that were in different states this year than they were last year.
Okay. One other question. Somebody told me that the check mark meant that the call sign was in the super check partial list. Can
Yes.
I safely we assume that the question mark means it is not?
The question, it depends on which checkbox you're talking about. There's different check marks. 1 second on that. Let me bring that screen up here.
Where you enter the call on the enter box and you got a partial call in, WB7, and it had a question mark till you completed it, and then it was a check, let's say.
Let me bring that up here. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay.
You just start typing something and there's a question mark.
Yes. That means that it hasn't found it in there yet. And if it does find it, I can't remember.
Okay, that's when it changed to a check mark from a question mark. I assume it found it in the super check partial. There you go.
No, yes. In this case, yes. You're in the super check partial. You are. But
Okay.
you weren't in the call history file because you probably not worked a 160 contest before.
Just this weekend had a ball.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't try. I heard you, but I wasn't able to work you. And I needed Wyoming, by the way. I did hear you though.
Next year. Thanks for answering.
I'm only spitting out 5 watts here, so it's kind of, and I don't have much of a 160 antenna, but I still do it anyway. So, yes, and that does answer the question on that. Yes, because you're not in the history file. So let me find someone that's in the history file. If I can think of someone off the top of my head who might have been here. Let me try this. I know who's in there. So Cade MR. See how it puts Ohio in automatically? Because he was in the history file.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Good question. Next question.
Is this something that the contest rules may or may not allow, this telnet window on the side?
Oh, so the band. Let's talk about that because that's a very good thing. If you're operating as assisted, you're allowed to use incoming spots from telnet. Some contests distinguish between assisted and not assisted. So if you're working in a contest and you're not allowed to use assistance, you have to just basically turn your telnet window off. So you don't want to run the telnet. But you can still use your band map window because you're putting the spots in. They're not coming from an outside source. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Nobody's going to jump in there. I'll do another one.
Yes.
I created a database called training just to fool around with and mess with. How do I get rid of those old databases where do I go to delete them, and how are they labeled? Are those labeled training, for example?
Those databases are in, let me bring it up here and show you actually. Maybe, there we go. Those databases are in your My Documents folder under the N1MM folder. And then in the databases folder. And they all end in .s3db. And if you look at the size of it, if you've not used it, it should be very, very low in number. So like on the CQ Worldwide, where I had 450 contacts, it's 188. But in the SS sweepstakes, where I only had a couple hundred where I had less than 100 contacts, it's only 66. Just be careful because they're tiny, so they don't take up much space. So don't get too anxious to delete things before you're sure you really don't want it. I'm not finding that I'm not.
Anthony, is it better to use only one database and have multiple contests in it, or to have multiple separate databases?
That's a perpetual argument, Zeke, that is always being hashed. What I do is if it's a big contest, I create one database for that contest separately. The reason I do that is because when I'm working on, if I'm switching back and forth between contests, this window here to me Let me, I got to take that out, contact out of there. I can't go back. This window to me can be very confusing. I can get the wrong one. So if I'm working, I don't want to get this too full because it gets hard to find things. So I pretty much create a new database for every big contest like the CQ Worldwide. But what I do typically for other contests is I create one database for per month or per week if I'm working a lot of things. So like on the weekend when there's 4 state QSO parties that I'm jumping back and forth between, I only want to see those 4, so I create one database for that weekend. But it really doesn't matter, whichever way you feel more comfortable with. And if you ask 100 N1MM users, you'll probably get 200 responses on that. Different responses. Other questions?
Okay, Anthony, this is Scott again, KN4SMO. I'm still trying to reconnect my telnet, and it seems like maybe it's an issue with it not recognizing COM port 3 for communications through the internet.
Are you using a how are you doing your internet? You're not using a modem, are you?
No.
Okay, you used to have a internet connection to the house. It shouldn't matter because it doesn't use a COM port.
Okay. It's wireless connection. Does that make a difference?
Do you have internet connection on your computer? Is it? Well, yeah, you obviously do because you're using it for this conference, correct?
I'm on the phone.
Oh, okay. Check to make sure you have Wi-Fi on your computer. Make sure the Wi-Fi is working.
Yeah, I just did. I'm connected.
Okay. Yeah, that I'm not sure what's causing it, but this is an example of the CW. Okay, there. This is an example of one of the typical circuits for the CW interface. I will send to you all. I'll put in the slideshow, the presentation. I have a thing that has 5 different ones in it. So I have a set of like 5 different circuit diagrams. I prefer to use the one that uses the optical isolator as opposed to the switching transistor. And actually, I'll put that in the slideshow. So when you go back to the slideshow afterward, it'll be there, Ron.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm making a note for myself to remember to do it.
Anthony, what if you're using a USB connection direct and not a USB?
You just use a USB to serial adapter. So pretend this is a serial port here and then just use a USB to serial adapter. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but there's no way of doing it when you're strictly on a USB connection?
You're going to have to, well, you could use a WinKeyer. I mean, there's no way to do it directly. It depends on the radio. As we said, some radios don't need a separate interface. So like if you're using a 7300, you don't need a separate keying interface.
How about the 7610?
I'm pretty sure it's the same thing.
Thank you.
Other questions?
WB7GR here again.
Yes.
I'm running a 7300, and one of the issues I found is that if you try to run N1MM through a virtual COM port, your CW keying with a single USB cable goes out the window, such as Win4ICOM, Win4Yaesu, or any of those other virtual COM port type programs. N1MM tends to throw up without having a WinKeyer or something of that nature to get it all going.
And that's one of the reasons why I use a WinKeyer, because I'm using the Win suite for K4. So what Greg is talking about is a common problem with USB ports and with other ways of sending CW. You may have some problems with your computer overhead and it'll screw it up. That's why I recommend the WinKeyer. And you don't need the full WinKeyer. I'm using the WinKeyer Mini. It's just this little tiny box, and basically a USB port goes in one side and the connection to your radio goes out the other side. And they're not on sale right now. They had them on sale for $49 a couple weeks back, but they're $59 now. But basically just a standard USB cable to your computer, one 3.5 millimeter to your radio jack out the other side, and you're all done. And it does a really good job. This is one way to go. The other way to go is with the I forget the name of it. The Mridy.
Marty.
Yes, the Marty. Thank you. Spell it's
Mortty.
Yeah, Mortty. Oops, there it is. Let's try another R in there. Yeah, there we go. More.
Type MORTTY V4.
Yeah, we need two T's, not two R's. There we go. So this little Mortty also works for doing FSA keying or CW keying, and it's even cheaper. It's a little kit. It's really small. Doesn't take very long to put together. I have one of these I use on my other radio.
Actually, this version 4, it's already put together.
Oh, okay. And the version 4 also has a speed adjustment on it. I think it's what's the adjustment on there? That is a speed adjustment?
That is the key speed. It also has a way to connect a separate audio, like a speaker.
Yes. If your radio doesn't have a side tone on it, you can use the side tone on that. So I recommend this. And KUT is one of the developers on the N1MM team. Yeah, so that's another good way to go. So I would suggest either those two. And Greg, I use the and the rest of you, I use the WinSuite program extensively because I want to be able to operate multiple different pieces of software on the radio at the same time. So I'm using this all the time. So I'm actually running virtual ports, so I have 3 virtual ports coming out of my aircraft. Okay, we are going to take a 2-minute break, and I will be right back. I've got to check on something, and I will be right back. So I'm going to stop sharing. Going to mute my So here's the interface that I've used in the past with my Elecrafts and actually some other radios, and it works very well. Using one opto isolator, one diode, and one resistor. Here's another one using 2 diodes, a transistor, and a resistor. And here's another one using an opto isolator. And these are all available in a presentation. One of my other short presentations. It's tiny.cc/FWM. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start on the next portion of our N1MM journey. So one of the big things is configuring the program, and we've talked about one of the tabs already. That's the hardware tab, but I want to talk about some of the other things you can configure in the program. And the way we do all the configurations is, most of the configurations is from the enter screen under the configuration menu. This is somewhat confusing though, because of all these things that are listed on the menu, there's 2 ways we can make configurations on them. Some of them have checkboxes where you simply turn something on or off by using a checkbox. Other ones, you click on them and then they have submenus that you go in and configure. So this whole section up here where it says configure ports, modes, etc., that's a whole bunch of submenus. Some of the other ones, it's a matter of just putting a checkbox on it. So these are all ones that are checkboxes to activate. Let's just talk about these real quick. Use Logger plus audio gives you an extra screen to set up your audio configuration. And we'll talk more about the audio configuration later. But one of the real common ones is if you're working a contest in search and pounce, like I do most of my contests, and you want to be able to quickly upload spots, if you simply have that button checked, let me bring that up so you can actually see it. By checking this spot all search and pounce QSOs, it'll actually send out spots each time you work a station that's not been spotted on the cluster. So you don't even have to do anything. You just passively keep working stations and it's automatically spotting them. If you want to turn that off, you just simply click on the checkbox and it goes away. It's somewhat confusing though, because when you do it, it closes the window. So you have to click and then go back to check to make sure you have it checked the way you want it. So when you check on it, it's going to close the window. So just be aware of that. Another one is QSYing wipes the call sign and spot in the band map. So what that basically means is if I start typing someone in here and I don't work them now, when I tune my knob off frequency, it'll automatically take it. It'll automatically take it out of the. Oh, here we go. I actually messed around and see. Notice this button at the bottom. It says reset my radio. I actually somehow screwed everything up because I actually closed my interface before for my virtual COM port. So I'm going to go ahead and restart N1MM. Okay, so that just sits in the background, but I accidentally closed that. So let me show you that again. If you type a call sign in here, if you tune the knob on your radio away from it, it'll automatically take that out of there. See that? When I come back into the focus of it again, it'll show back up on there again. when I press the space bar. But if I tune away from it, it QSYing away takes it out of there. So you don't have to delete it. So if you don't work somewhere and you just change your frequency, it'll automatically take it out. And again, that's just by having this box checked right here. It says QSYing wipes the call sign out of the band map. And there's some other ones you can check. And most of these you're not going to have to worry about once you pick one setting. You're not going to change these often. And some of them aren't even going to be effective. But the one I really want to mention is this last one. Using those call history text files doesn't work unless you enable them. And you have to enable them here on this screen. So even though you load them, unless you go in here under your configuration and make sure this box is checked, they will not work. Okay? This box right here. Now, the other settings, the non-checkbox settings, are all these configurations tabs called the configurers tab. And there's a whole section in the N1MM logging information on setting all these. I'm going to go through them one by one here. The first one is the hardware tab, and we've already talked about that. The next one, though, is the function keys. And the function keys tab actually does two things. The function keys are at the bottom here, but it also has some other information about how they interact and work. So let's take a look at those real quick. So things like sending leading zeros in your serial numbers. So if the contest has leading zeros checked, if I send contact 1, it'll actually send 001. And then I also have it set for cut numbers. So instead of sending 001, it'll send TT1. So this is just the way that when I press the macro buttons, the way they work is adjusted by these settings. And you can go into more detail on these by going to the help section of any of the screens. I'm not going to talk too much about this particular one. The digital modes is something we'll talk about in some more detail here. But if you want to work RTTY with this, you need to have one of the 4 different RTTY programs that are available to interface with it. MMTTTY is one of them, but there's other ones such as Two Tone that'll work. And you can set these up to work with RTTY, and we're not going to talk much about RTTY today. This other tab is not something you really want to mess around with. There's things here are not, some of these can be very confusing. The one I do want to mention though is this little one here. It says CC Cabrillo to logs of SuperCheck partial. If you use the program to send your logs in for submission, it'll send a copy to the SuperCheck partial people automatically. This is the section, if you are using WinKey, this is where you configure it at for WinKey. And you can put in information here to change different settings if necessary. I'm skipping through some of these pretty quickly because you're not going to be messing with most of these for the most part. Depending on your radio, these may need to be changed, but again, that's specific to the particular radio. And in the settings section of N1MM documentation, it tells you whether you need to make changes on this particular screen based on your particular radio you choose. The antenna screen, I don't use N1MM to change my antennas. I actually do it for my radio, but you can actually set it up so that it will change the different antennas that's used depending on what's going on in your screen, and it'll automatically share that information on those online scoreboards. The broadcast data is used for WSJTX and some other tools. We're not going to talk about that. And then the last screen we'll talk about in detail later. It's the WSJTX setup screen if you want to use N1MM to do FT8 and FT4 contesting. So those are the configuration tabs, and I have them all shown here in the handout. They're just copies of mine, as you can see. Let's talk about that audio setup and monitoring screen. That will not show up unless you have this box right here checked, use logger plus audio. If you have that set up, you will get this extra set of screens, and this is what they look like. This is if you want to record messages to be able to use voice keying on your radio, on your N1MM. So if you want to record things like your call sign, exchanges, etc., this is where you record them, and you can test playback the messages through here. And again, this microphone that you're using here isn't necessarily the microphone you're using with your radio. This is the one you want to use to record the messages with. So I use a different microphone to record my messages with than I actually use when I'm doing my actual my actual radio communication. So if I'm in a phone contest and I press my call sign key, it actually sends a voice recording out. And I don't want to get too bogged down in this because as you're just starting out, this audio messaging is something you're not going to want to jump into immediately. But I'm just going to point it out, and then you can go back into it more detail later if you like. The next tool right on the menu right here is the one that says change CW single sideband ready digital function keys. These are the macro keys that are on our entry screen. So right here, all these keys, if I press this key, for example, and I'm on CW, this will send thank you. And it just did. You couldn't hear it, but my radio just sent thank you. So you can set all these macros, and most of them involve sending information. There are two sets. The set in blue is for when you're using it as a run radio when you're calling CQ. The set in green is for searching and pouncing. These REMs are just remarks, and these are not actually active. These are just information to help in the documentation of these macros. So when I press the F4 key, it'll send my call sign. If I have a call sign in the entry field and I press the F5 key, it'll send their call sign. So these macros depend on what you've already entered into the entry screen before you press the button. You can customize these, and this is the default ones. I've actually changed mine. I have F11, which is empty here. I have it set up so it sends a code. Let me show you what it looks like on my screen. So when I send F11, when I press F11 key, it sends a command to my Ellercraft to spot the frequency. So it's like reaching up and hitting the spot button. It automatically adjusts the frequency of my radio to spot the station. And you can put in commands for different radios. You can do this with the Kenwoods. You can do this with some of the ICOM 7300. You can do this with the Ellercraft. You can use commands that are available for your radio and have them sent by actually pressing one of the keys. So when I'm operating a CW contest, I can simply hit F11 on my keyboard instead of reaching up and hitting the spot button to center the frequency of a station I'm trying to work. So this is the way you use the macros. As I said before, it depends on whether you're CQing or whether you're searching and pouncing. So let's look at CQing first. And we'll actually look at both ends of it because we'll have one station CQing and one station searching and pouncing. So the CQing station presses F1, and that actually sends the CQ along with their call sign. The other station would hear that. They would enter their call sign into the entry field. They don't do anything. They just enter it there. They would then say their call sign, or if it's on or phone, or they press the F4 key to send it in CW. So that would automatically send it to the other station. The station answers. If they copy your call sign, they'd put your call sign in their call sign box. They'd press the F5 key and that would respond to you, or they would say it in phone, and that information would go back to you. You would press the space bar on the answering side here so that you'll be ready to type in the received exchange. They can press the F2 key to send the exchange to you. You can type it in. They press the space bar to move to the cursor to put in the exchange field from the station that's responding to them. The responding station would press the F2 key to send the exchange. They would type the exchange in. They'd press the F3 key to send their acknowledgement, the thank you, and then they'd press enter to log the QSO, and they'd hit the F1 to continue back through the cycle again. The searching and pouncing station would press enter when they have all the information to log the QSO. So just an example of how these are working. And of course, you're only going to be doing one or the other. You're not doing both of them. So any questions about using the macro keys? And again, these macro keys, as I said earlier, can also be used with recorded messages. So they're not only usable in CW.
How do you get back to default macros if you've tinkered with them?
You can reset them by going out and entering, by downloading them, or you can go in for each individual contest and you can actually change them in the contest settings under associated files, and then you can come in here and choose the file name for the macros that you want. But the macro files are all end in .mc. And your default one should already be there, hopefully. If not, you can download the default again and put it in there and then upload it. So I've changed all mine, but I can also go back and put them in defaults if I want to. Other questions? And again, when you're first starting out, if you don't want to use this particular function, you don't need to start by using this function. And they can be tweaked and adjusted for any contest you want. And they're fairly easy to change. Actually, they're so easy to change that you can get yourself into trouble easily. So again, being able to reset them is always a good idea, and having a backup copy. But you can simply go in and type the change in. So let's say I want to have 599 set in front of the exchange. I don't have to. It depends on the contest whether people are sending it. In the 160 contest, they do. In a lot of other contests, they don't. So I would simply delete it out. So I can come in here and change this anytime I want. Anything that's in brackets means it's being pulled from the information that's in the program. Anything that's just typed without brackets means it's something I've actually added to it. Each of them is composed of the name that's on the label, a comma, and then actually the command that happens. So you notice that the first part is a label, then there's a comma, and then is actually what's going to happen. And if you're more interested in this, there's a whole section on information you can read on the N1MM site. I don't want to bog everyone down in this. Any other questions about macros? Okay, let's talk a little bit about keyboard shortcuts. And again, you can choose to use as many of these as you want or not. I have the full list is available on the N1MM site. It's multiple pages long, but I just pulled out some of the more common ones. We've already talked about a lot of these, how you use the space or tab key to move around in the enter field, how pressing the enter key logs something. We talked about, I think, all of these already. But there's also some you can use inside the band map. We've talked about most of these by scrolling in or out with the mouse wheel, by zooming in or out with the plus or minus key, control up or control down arrow to grab the next QSO that's available. These are all things you can do. One I haven't talked about is if you want to send a spot, you can do alternate P, and that will actually send a spot directly from your log, even if you don't have it set up to automatically send spots. And then control key, if you're in the CW, works only when you're in the CW mode. If I'm in the CW mode and I do control K, it pops up a little window somewhere in the world. I'm not sure where it went. It went off into Never Neverland, I think. Let me try that one more time. So there it is. And I can simply type any free text I want in here, hit enter, and it'll send this message out in CW. So even if you don't have macro set up and you want to send something in CW, you can always do it from the keyboard. So those are the keyboard shortcuts. Now, I think we've went through pretty much everything except for the digital setup, which I'll talk about later. But what I want to talk about now is what you do after the contest. But before we do that, I want to make sure there's no other questions about any of the setup we've talked about so far. With the contest, you need to generate the file to send into the contest sponsor. And the file they usually want is a Cabrillo file. The way you do that is by going to the File menu, and then you go to Generate Cabrillo File right here. And when you do that, it's going to give you a little warning message. It says, the Cabrillo file will be generated with the following sent exchange. Well, I'm using Ohio in this contest, so that's correct. Just make sure it's correct. And then it also says it'll add RST if necessary. It'll place the correct serial number, etc., etc. So I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. And then it's going to give me one more message. It's going to say, your category is single assisted operator, one transmitter, QRP. If this is not correct, you need to change it. Okay, that is correct. If it wasn't correct, I would click the no button. I would then go back into the open contest button and change the settings here, click OK, and I'd be ready to do my Cabrillo file. It's very important you do that first because it's going to grab the information from that contest setup and put it in the file. So I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. Yes, that's fine. And it's going to ask me for a name for it. It's always just going to pick your log sign, your call sign. So I tack in front of it something like the year and the contest name. You can't put too much information here, something that will help you find it later on. And I've actually already used this name because I actually did the Cabrillo file earlier, so I'm going to put a B after it. So put whatever information there you know so you can identify it later. And I'm going to say save, and it's going to say, do you want to edit the file? Say yes, and it'll actually open the file up so you can then view it and check to make sure it looks correct. Are you seeing the file in front of us right now? Someone give me, very good. Okay, so let's look at the Cabrillo file real quick. It has your location, all your information that it pulls. It had all that stuff about your band, about the power level, whether you're assisted or not. It has your claim score. It has your address and all that information. Then it actually, this part right here has your log. This is your log that's being sent to the contest sponsor. It takes the exchange that I sent and puts it in here automatically. It takes the exchange that I put in for the other station and shows it here, along with their call sign. It has all the time information, the frequency information, the mode information, date, etc. And it has this whole big long file. And then it has an end of the log statement at the very end of it with a semicolon. That's what gets sent to the contest providers, and that's what they want. So that's the Cabrillo file. And the place that it stores it, so you know where it's at when you're ready to send it, is again in your documents folder, in the N1MM folder, in the export files section. And it puts two things there. It puts log files, and it also puts ADIF files, which we'll talk about in a moment. So this is the file that I just created that I'd want to send to the contest sponsor. So now let's look at the other thing we can generate, and that's an ADIF file. ADIF files are helpful if you want to export your file to another system, to upload it to Logbook of the World, put it into your regular logging program, and I'll talk more about other logging programs later. But to do that, you simply click on the export to file, you choose the format you want, which is ADIF. You click on that, you give it a name, and you let it generate the file. And I've already named that. Let me give this a different name because I've already used that name. And it generates the file, and it saves the file again in your folder right here as an ADIF file. If I was to open this up, you'll see that it's a text file that can be imported into almost any other amateur radio program. Do not send this in as your contest entry. They want the .log file, not the .abi file. Matter of fact, I'm going to delete that because that is an extra file I don't need. Okay, good. The other thing is, I would strongly suggest that you back your data up. You can copy that whole N1MM folder, or at least copy the export files folder, but I would suggest you back up that whole My Documents N1MM folder somehow, either on a USB drive, on an online storage. I actually just I just copy all mine to my Google Drive, and that way I have a copy that I can access no matter where I'm at. I can't open it up from within there, but I can always download it to the computer I'm on in case something would happen to my particular computer. So it's just like any word processing file that you might want in the future, you want to back it up. The one thing you can't do is you can't set up that My Documents N1MM folder as a drive on a cloud-based computer. Someone says, well, why don't I just make that my Dropbox folder instead of my Documents folder? You can't do that. The program won't work if you try and use cloud storage as your primary way. It requires it be stored locally initially. You can always make a copy later, but you can't operate the program with the data stored on a cloud file. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Anthony?
Yes.
Is it really necessary to save the Cabrillo and the ADIF file? Can't you recreate them from the log in the database?
You can. You can. I do the ADIF file because I upload it into my general logging program, but I could actually do that. I could always generate another one as long as I protect all the files. So you want to make sure that you're protecting at least one of the systems, either your log files, your ADIF files, or your .log files. Any one of them will be able to be reproduced, but it just makes it easier because I want to be able to import my files into another system that I generate all three of them. Or I generate both of them, and the one that's already there in my databases stays there. So it's not necessary to back them all up, but no one's ever complained that they back too much stuff up. I worked with in the computer field for many years before I retired, and one of the things that no one ever came to me and complained was, Anthony, I accidentally backed up too many files. They always came and told me when they accidentally deleted too many files, or when their computer died. My sister called me a couple years ago in tears, so hysteric that I didn't even recognize it was her, because she had spent a whole semester working on a class, and then her computer crashed and she lost everything. And fortunately, I was able to pull out the files. That's what big brothers do, but you can't count on being able to do that all the time. So always back up things.
What about network storage rather than cloud storage? Can you do network?
That's fine, but you just can't do it on your live version. Don't try and operate with your primary folder being on a network drive.
Okay.
Now, that said, there's a whole networking capability, which I'm not going to talk about today, but if you're doing multi-op operations, N1MM supports all sorts of network interconnectivity between the stations. But what I'm talking about today is single operator. But if you're using a multi-operator station, N1MM can let you do a local network, even a wide area network, even a internet-based network to connect the stations that are involved. And it's nice because the way it's set up is each station, if one station fails, the other stations can reproduce the results and have them regenerated. But that's beyond scope of today. Now, one of the most common things that happens is when you're done with the contest, you make a mistake like, oops, my clock was an hour and a half off. Or, oops, I didn't realize that my radio frequency wasn't set right, or something like that. So there is a whole link in N1MM of helpful hints for when you destroy something, how to hopefully fix it. Doesn't always work, but I've had it work many times. So there's a lot of different things. One of the more common things is having to enter a lot of QSOs after the contest. Let's say your computer dies halfway through the contest and you end up using a paper log for the rest of it. Well, you can go back and enter those multiple QSOs into N1MM in a special mode that doesn't require you to do as many keystrokes and changes and everything. So there's a whole section on what they call rapid QSO entry. So you can read through that. I'm not going to go through that. It's on that link on that previous page. Another thing you can do, this is just a little description of how it works. You just type in the bands you want, then you type in the information, the call signs, and etc., and then you go back and adjust the times when you're done. You can also, as I said earlier, if there's a problem with your computer, you can adjust all the times by a fixed amount. Say you want to adjust your computer to be 55 minutes earlier than it was before or whatever. Again, you can do all this within the program. Whether you're doing any of these, always make a copy of your original log and don't work on the original, work on a copy of it before you start trying to manipulate anything. And again, all that information is on this link right here. On after the contest and how to merge logs. You can put logs together. You could even use N1MM to take an ADIF file and bring it in and have it scored as a contest as long as it's in the right format. And again, that information is all available in here. I'm not going to go into that in detail. Any questions about logs? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is UDCs, User Defined Contest. There's that giant list of contests, but even then, there's some special contests that only a few hundred people do at a time, so they're not included in N1MM. So you can create a special user-defined contest, or if you're participating in a contest, someone might have already created one for you. In Ohio, we have a contest called Parks on the Air that occurs every September with the state parks, and someone created a UDC file. They uploaded it to N1MM, and by downloading that file, you can add it to N1MM so it's available as an additional contest. Well, not everyone would be interested in the Ohio Parks on the Air contest, so they make it a user-defined contest. So what you do is you go into N1MM and you download user-defined contest. It's this last one down here. And you find the contest you want. Let's just do the slow speed CW contest. It's on Sunday afternoons. You click on the download button and it downloads a set of files. When you open that up, you take that file and you have to put that .udc file, you have to copy it into the folder where N1M expects to find it. And of course, that's again under Documents, N1MM. And there's a whole folder called User Defined Contest. You paste that UDC file in there, and then it will add it to the list of contests in N1MM. There is one big gotcha though. It doesn't work immediately. You have to restart N1MM before you can do it. Once you restart it, when you go in to start a new contest, you will see that now on the list of contests, you now have the new one you've added. So let's look and see whether we have the K1USSN in here. We should. And there it is right there. So now I have an extra contest in my list. If I take it out of if I delete it from that folder and restart the program again, this listing will go away. It won't show up in my list of potential contests. So it always looks, when it starts up, in that folder to see whether you've added or removed any user-defined contest. And on the N1MM documentation page, you can actually tells you how to create your own user-defined contest files if you want to. So what I want to talk about next is digital modes, and let's first dispense with RIDI and PSK because they're handled a little bit differently than FT8 and FT4. So if you want to operate any of these digital modes, it requires a special program to be able to decode and encode the software, the modes. So we need a RTTY program. So I showed you earlier MMTTY, two-tone. Also MMVARI or FLDigi are available for RTTY. For PSK, MMVARI or FLDigi. For FT8 and FT4, WSJTX or JTDX will work. So you have to have these additional programs loaded on your computer before you can operate these special modes with N1MM. You also have to do some configuration in the N1MM program and in the particular software, digital software program. So this is the information on setting up N1MM with digital software. I'm not sure how many people out there use RTTY or FT8 or FT4 with contesting, but if you want to do that, you need to make some special changes in the program. I'm not going to talk about the RTTY or PSK today, but I will talk about FT8 and FT4. But before I do it, I want to tell you that it's not easy to do. If you follow the instructions, you can get it to work, but it's not simply as easy as clicking one button. Has anyone out there set up N1MM to work FT8 or FT4 with WSJTX? Got one. Maybe if I can't see everyone's face right now, but I'm guessing that not very many people. So I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to do it, I'll go through the steps. I'm going to go through the steps anyway, but there's another option. If you don't want to mess around and you're only operating a contest that has FT8 and FT4 in it, you can simply operate the contest and then import the ADIF file from WSJTX into N1MM and it'll score it for you, and you don't need to do any fancy configuration. But you don't get to use all the features of N1MM. You just use it as a way to convert the ADIF file into a contest file and have it scored for you. So that's the main choice you have to make before you decide whether you want to do this or not, whether you want to just run the contest in WSJTX and import the file later, or whether you actually want to set up N1MM to support the contest software. I'm sorry, the digital software. So let's go through what's involved in setting up WSJTX with N1MM. There's three basic things we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing configuration inside N1MM. We're going to be doing configuration in WSJTX, and then we're going to be setting up the specific contest in WSJTX and in N1MM. So we need to do all of these before it works. You also need to ensure that the contest setup is configured to include the digital modes. Otherwise, the contest digital mode context will not be given points. Now, what that means is, in case I forget to tell you later, when you're creating a new contest, you have to make sure that in addition to all the other work you do, you have to go in here under mode and make sure that it has digital included here, or even if you set everything up right, it won't score the digital points into the contest for you. So what that means is if you want to go the earlier route, the easier route, like I mentioned earlier, and just import the ADIF file, all you would do is come in here and make sure that this was chosen as digital. Then you can import your ADIF file from WSJTX into N1MM and it'll actually score it for you. So here's the steps for setting up N1MM to work with WSJTX. So we need to go in to make some changes in N1MM. So we need to go into our configure and we go to the final tab, or typically the last tab on the right. This is the WSJTX tab, and we need to make sure that the settings is checked as enable here for the IP address. This is an internal IP address and the UDP port. If you're doing 2 radio operation, you need to worry about a second radio, but we're not doing that here. We're just going to talk about 1 radio. The next thing you need to do is you need to click on this select button. You cannot type this in. You need to click on the select button, search through your file directory until you find the WSJTX program. If you're doing it with the second radio, you need to do it again, but we're not going to be doing a second radio. Then you need to click the enable button here, and then you click the OK button. So this is all you need to do on this screen, but you need to find this program by clicking on the select and going to that program. The next thing you need to do is configuration inside the WSJTX program. Now you might say, well, I already have WSJTX already configured. No, What it does is it actually starts a new unconfigured version of WSJTX from this shortcut you gave it here. So the WSJTX, instead of having your normal settings at the top here, will say for EW1. That means it's going to be used with the N1MM software. And it means all the defaults will be restored to all the settings will be restored to the default. So it won't list the radio, it won't list an operator, it won't list anything. You can either reconfigure WSJTX for your station when you're done, or you can copy the settings from your normal WSJTX. Either way is fine. So once you get it set up, you need to make a couple changes in the WSJTX program, but you have to start it from inside of N1MM. So you have to make sure the program is not running. Then you go to N1MM and you go to the window section and you come down here where it says load WSJTX. When you do that, it'll load the program. Here it comes. And you'll note at the top that it'll say for EW1 or for EW2 if you're running 2 radio setup. Now, when you go in to your settings screen, all these settings will be wiped out. I've already went through and rechanged all mine. This is not a new setup, but yours will be a new setup. So you'll need to put the call sign information in, the radio information in, all the way that you're doing it. But you have to make sure you're doing those changes on the program that you're running from within N1MM. Also, when you click on that, it opens up this little window. This window needs to stay open. You cannot close this. You can move it out of the way, but you can't close it. You go through and make you need to make a couple changes in the N1MM program under the reporting tab. You need to make sure that all these settings are set properly. Then, instead of putting in the radio you normally use, you're going to put in your radio as DX Lab Suite Commander. And that doesn't have to be installed on your computer. You just have to put that there, and it acts sort of as a fake radio that N1MM uses the key, the WSJTX software. Every time you want to use the WSJTX with N1MM, make sure it's completely closed, start N1MM up, and then restart the WSJTX program only from within N1MM. So again, you have to make sure you're starting it from the right place or it won't work properly. So again, you have to go into Window, and you have to go into WSJTX, load WJTX. It opens up additional window. Let me just actually do that here. And this window looks like this. It's called the WSJTX decode list. It also opens up this little window here that we showed earlier. You don't type anything into the N1MM entry window. You actually work from within the WSJTX software, operating like you normally would from within here. Let's see if this contest is still going on. Actually, the contest is over. There was a contest going on. And also, the other thing you need to do, this is strictly has to do with the particular contest you're operating. You might need to go in and change the settings for WSJTX under the Advanced tab using one of the special operating activities. So the contest this morning was using the RTTY roundup rules. So you had to have this box checked here and your call sign in here. Now, I don't want to go too far down that road because we could get off on a whole we could get off on a whole WSJTX route and forget about N1MM. So I've recorded all the information that you need to worry about in the software, but that's all I'm going to really say about it unless we have some questions.
Can you use JT Alert with this?
You cannot use JT Alert when you're using N1MM with the software because they both use the same UDP port, and you can't set up an alternative. So the answer is no, at least not now. Maybe in the future, but not now. Any other questions on FT8, FT4?
If I get this configured with FT8, will that affect any non-N1MM settings?
No, because it runs completely two separate versions of the program. So if I go back here now and I start my N1, my WSJTX from its normal start, you'll see that it functions just normally. And you'll notice at the top, it doesn't have that EW1 on there. It doesn't change any of the settings on it. So it won't change any of your original WSJTX settings or alter the way the program works. So you're running a special version of it when you're running it from within N1MM. It was very hard to do the first time. It was a little bit easier with this method this year, and I'm hoping that it'll continue to get easier and easier over the years, but it's still a little bit sticky wicket when you're getting it going. Okay, let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to do a basic review, and this will bring up any questions you might have for each new contest. We've already talked about most of this, but I want to review through it and see if there's also any questions as we go through. So each time you want to operate a new contest, even though you've been maybe using N1MM for years, there's a sort of a checklist I do each time, and that's to make sure that N1MM is up to date. And I said earlier to automatically ask you if you want to do an update, but if it doesn't ask you, you can always force it to look. And the way you do that is you go to Tools, check for new program version, and install. And it will tell you if there's a new version, or in my case, it's telling me I'm running the latest version. If it said there was a new version here, I click on the Yes button to upgrade it, and it would download the software, shut down N1MM, install the new version, and then restart it for you. So it's pretty painless and pretty easy to do. In addition to checking to make sure it's up to date, you have to decide whether you're going to create a new database or use an existing one. You're then going to need to create a new contest, as we talked about earlier. Make sure you read through the contest rules, so you make sure you're in a category that's acceptable, power level exchange. All that needs to match up with what the contest sponsor has. We talked about clicking on the associated files to add or to update the call history text file. And again, you want to do that from the associated files tab. If you want to load a different set of macros, you can do that from up here under the macro section. Some basic things that apply to almost any contesting software you use: check and make sure that your computer's time is correct. If you're operating assisted, make sure the telnet window is open, configured, and connected, and make sure it's working. If you're using filtering, make sure you check to make sure you have the filtering set correct for the type of contest you're operating in. And then what I always do is I enter a few QSOs to make sure everything's working. I change my radio frequency from the computer. I change my radio frequency from the radio to make sure everything is tracking. I make sure the proper exchange is displayed in the window. I send my macros into a dummy load to make sure that they're keying the radio right. I make sure that it's scoring the contest. So real quick, if I were to do this by accident and have this set up wrong, and I put something in here for a digital mode, it would not show up in my scoring box as a contest. So I know there's something wrong. So that's a good way to check everything to make sure it's working, is just by entering some test contacts in. When you're done, just go through and delete them all. Just right click on them, delete them all, clean them out before the contest. And then when you're all done, delete all the test QSOs. This is just a repeat of the slide earlier. If you are using the super partial check window or you're using the reverse call history text file, remember that it is not necessarily right. What you get on the air is what you need to enter into the information. Now, let's say you're using a second computer or portable operation and you want to move N1MM. You have it all set up, everything's working perfectly, and now you decide you want to put it on a new computer. You can do it fairly easily by installing N1M on the new computer using the full installer from the download. Then you can copy your N1M documents folder, the folder from your documents subdirectory, over the new installation, and it will copy all your settings into the new system. So install the program, then overwrite it with the settings from your existing setup. You delete the N1MM logger.ini file, and it will be recreated then when you restart the program, and that will allow you to set up things like the right COM port, because of course the COM ports won't be the same, and things like that will be different on the new computer than they were on the original computer. Make sure you change your station information if you're going to be operating in a new location, and make sure you use the proper exchange for your new location. If you're operating portable, in addition to all those things, I always like to make sure that N1M is going to work when I get there. I don't see it as just an accessory. I see it as a necessity when I'm contesting. My wife and I always usually we didn't get to do it this year. We usually use field day as an opportunity to travel to another state and operate from somewhere else. So I have a whole routine that I do. The first thing I do is I make sure I copy all of these things, download them in case I don't have internet access, onto a USB drive. The full installation file in case something happens to N1MM, the update file for the latest update, the program documentation for N1MM is like 130 pages long, and I copy that PDF onto my USB drive so I have it with me. And then make sure, if necessary, you have any UDC files, or you'll be making a trip to the nearest McDonald's to use their internet to download it. But a lot of times when we operate for field day, I'm at a location where there's no internet access. On your radio, for your radio, make sure you have a copy of your driver software in case you have to reset things. Make sure you have any utilities that you use with your software. For example, on the Elecraft, there's these utility software to set up the memories and things like that. Make sure you have a copy of that. And then also get a copy of your operating manual for your radio as a PDF, and have all this stuff on one USB drive. And again, no one's ever complained to me that they brought too much information with them when they went away. They've only complained when they didn't have it. And then I also download some extra things. I always make sure I make a copy of the contest rules for the contest as a PDF file, so I have it. If you need any maps or anything you want to bring with you, those are good to have. And then any accessories you might be using with the radio. If you're going to be using digital modes like the FT8 and FT4, make sure you have a way to sync your time without having internet access. And I like a little USB drive. GPS will take care of that very easily for under $15. And then the final thing I do is I set up my station on a table away from my operating place, make sure everything's working, test everything out, then I pack everything from there so that I make sure I didn't forget something. And that is the end of the slideshow. And we are going to have more questions now. But again, I just want to remind you, the whole slideshow is available at tiny.cc/N1MM Elmer. And before we start the questions, just two other things. Coming up in January, I'm doing 2 AWRL webinars. These will be a half an hour long with questions afterward. One is QSLing in an online world, but the one that might even be more interest to you is amateur radio logging. I'm going to talk about the whole concept of having a master log for your station, a master logging software, and how you would import things like N1MM logs into your master log. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing here and take questions, comments, complaints. First of all, congratulations to the 46 people that are still here. I know it's been long. So let's go through, and any questions you might have. We have plenty of time for questions.
I've got a question.
Yes, Doc.
This is Doc. Can the configuration for the standalone, and I can't get it out, WSJTX
Yes.
Be imported or overwritten to the default in the one that runs within N1MM and then be modified selectively? And will that save any time?
Absolutely. And if you're comfortable manipulating files, that's the best way to do it. And the instructions are in that link on the slideshow. Because that's exactly what I did. But if you aren't comfortable doing it, then you're better off just making the changes on the program. But yes, you can do that. It only involves copying 3 files and moving them over to the new folder. Does that answer your question, Doc? Doc?
That's got it.
Okay, good. Next question.
Greg again. After you've generated your Cabrillo file and answered the questions, and you get the little window that comes up, says edit. Then there's one that says email to SuperCheck partial, and I believe it says cancel.
Yes.
Uh, so if I click edit and I go look at the files, and yep, that looks good to go. How do I get back to it to click on the send to SuperCheck partial, or is it a manual event after that?
It's a manual event after that.
Okay.
But what you can do is you can just save it again if it looked okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
One more. Can the configuration and the data files generated by N1MM be put anywhere other than the default directory? Can they put on a different drive?
Yes, as long as it's not a cloud-based drive.
Okay.
And if you actually, on some of the newer Windows computers, if you buy the I forget what it's called, but the really stripped down version of Windows 10 that they try and sell you on some of these cheap laptops has the default storage location set as OneDrive for your documents. And if you try and install it, N1MM just sort of balks at it and it doesn't tell you what the problem is. So I've had a number of people where that's been the problem. Oh, I also want to mention before I forget, I have in the presentation in the very beginning under the resources, one of the things that it talks about is joining the N1MM mailing list. There's a mailing list that has a very active support following on it where you can ask any questions or just follow the mail and learn a lot of important things. It's a .io mailing list. Next question, please.
You indicated at the beginning this was being recorded. Will that be, was it going to be a YouTube video, or how would anyone access the recording later?
It probably would be a YouTube video. I've got to figure out. I'm not the owner of this particular account, so I've got to double check with him to make sure. But the recording button is turned on. So I will if I do get it posted, I will send an email out to everyone. We weren't able to do the breakout rooms today. I was going to do a little practice where we could pretend we were having a contest and you could log each other, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that. So you'll have to do that on your own. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, you had at the very end of the slideshow, you mentioned you were going to have a presentation of uploading to your master log.
Yes.
You went through that very quickly. Can you be more specific when that will be and how
yes.
to?
Let me bring that slide up here real quick. Those are going to be through the ARRL. Are you seeing the slide now?
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be January 14th, and the topic is called Amateur Radio Logging. It's going to be 1.5 hour presentation, and I'm basically going to talk about the advantages of having one station log where you keep all your records, because that's one of the things. I would not consider N1MM as my station log. It's a contesting log, and what you can't do with it is you can't do things like track awards, easily upload to Logbook of the World, download from Logbook of the World, upload to EQSL, things of that nature. a lot of people try and use it for more than it can do as far as being a station log. It's great for contesting, but it's not. There's a lot of better ways to handle station logging. And the nice thing is, it's just super easy to import it. I'm using the logging program I use is called Logic by PDA Software, and I simply click on like 2 buttons, and it imports that ADIF file in there and updates all my log information that way. Then I click on a couple more buttons, and everything's uploaded to EQSL and to Logbook of the World. So those are both coming up. January 5th, I'm going to be talking about QSLing, going to be talking about Logbook of the World, EQSL, and some other things. Both of those will be recorded. So if you can't attend them, that one is at 1 p.m. and one is at 12:30 p.m. But both will be recorded and available. Also, I have already done 2 other webinars for the ARRL. One back in early, I think it was probably August or September, on FT8 and FT4, and another one on Introduction to Contesting. And those are available if you go to the ARRL website. And you click on the section that says Webinars New. Everyone see where I'm at?
Do you need to be a member of the ARRL?
You don't have to be a member to view the recorded ones. I don't know about the live ones. So what you do is, these are the ones that are scheduled, and then these are the recorded webinars. And if you click on the recorded webinars, you have to put in your email address to view them. But so this is the one on, let's see, where is it at? These are the new ones. These are the ones that are already recorded. Here's the Introduction to Contesting. Where's it at? Here it is, the first one. So when you click on this, oh, you don't even have to put, you know what, I'm already logged in, so it may be grabbing my information from my previous login. But normally it'd ask you for an email address before you do this. Oh, here we go. So you got to put your information in. But it doesn't check it against a database or anything, so it just, and they do these with Webinex, so I can't use my nice little background, so I have to put up a fake background behind me so you can't see the rest of the junk in my room. Okay, does that answer your question, Dave?
Yep.
Okay, next question. Yes, Ann.
I had to put in my password in order to view those webinars, so you maybe do have to be a member.
To sign up for the original one, you do, but to see the copies, I don't think you have to be to see the copies, to see the recorded ones. I'm not sure on that. If you're not, it's good to set up the join ARRL. You get to watch. You can watch 4 videos with me in it. And actually, I don't know what the case is going to be on the class when it comes out, if you're going to need to be a member or not. But the class is going to be extensive. There's going to be 6 modules for on contesting, and a lot of resources along with them. Next question.
Anthony?
Yes.
W2T here.
Yes.
In your preliminaries on this, you mentioned the ferrite cables for the connection to the radio to the computer.
Yes.
Can you give me a source for those cables?
I've purchased them a number of places. The last ones I got were from Amazon, and they were about $7 a piece, I think. I'm checking real quick here. Yeah, $6. These are. Maybe do the share here. Are you seeing a cable?
Anthony, I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah. Yes, go right ahead.
I don't, I mean, that cable certainly can help, but it's not going to, can't and may not solve your RF issues.
No, it is not. It is not a panacea. Okay. You'll find these cables available for the radios that don't use a standard USB cable. This end has this special connector for Yaesu, and then it has a USB on the other end. And these cables work very well. These ones for $27 and $21 that have the FTDI chip on them will work beautifully. This one for $977 here probably has a prolific driver chip in it and will not work half the time and will just cause endless headaches. If they show a driver being shipped with it or give you a link to download the driver, run away, because that means that they're not using it. They're using a prolific driver, and it's usually a counterfeit driver. And I've had nothing but problems with these. So I always make sure that when I'm looking at something, I'm making sure that it has an FTDI chip in it. If it says prolific on it, run away. And I think that I'm not sure if any of you have had the same experience, but I know a lot of people that have. Next question.